Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and tell us where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. We love hearing what you think. Now, let's begin. The conference room smelled like expensive leather and bad decisions. Claire Bennett sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, her hands clenched in her lap as her father's voice boomed through the space like thunder rattling windows. Richard Bennett, patriarch of the Bennett real estate empire, was a man who'd built his fortune on ruthless deals and ironclad control. And right now, that control extended to his daughter's future. "The merger with Thornwood Properties is already arranged," he said, not looking up from the contract spread before him. "You'll marry Marcus Thornwood in 6 months. The union will secure our position in the Northeast Corridor and double our portfolio value." Claire's mother, Victoria, sat beside him with her usual placid expression, diamonds glittering at her throat. "It's a wonderful match, darling. Marcus comes from excellent lineage." "Marcus is 43 years old," Claire said, her voice tight. "He's been married twice. He treats his assistants like servants and has a reputation for being successful," Richard interrupted, finally meeting her eyes. His gaze was cold, calculating. "Which is more than I can say for your current trajectory." "You're 26, Claire. You've wasted enough time with that art gallery nonsense. It's time you contributed to this family's legacy." Art gallery nonsense. Claire felt the words like a slap. She'd spent 3 years building Bennett Arts from the ground up, showcasing emerging artists, creating a space that actually meant something beyond profit margins. But to her father, anything that didn't generate immediate returns was worthless. "I won't marry him," Claire said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I don't love him. I don't even like him." "Love," Richard scoffed, shuffling his papers. "Love is a fantasy for people who can't afford pragmatism. You'll marry Marcus, you'll produce heirs, and you'll fulfill your duty to this family. That's final." Claire stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood. "And if I refuse?" Her father's smile was thin, predatory. "Then I'll cut you off entirely. No trust fund, no allowance, no access to family resources. You'll be out of this house by the end of the month. Let's see how long your little art project survives without Bennett money backing it." Victoria placed a manicured hand on Richard's arm. "Darling, perhaps we're being too harsh. She needs to understand reality," Richard said dismissively. Then, to Claire, "You have until Friday to give me your answer. Choose wisely." Claire walked out of that conference room feeling like she was drowning. The Bennett mansion, 50 rooms of marble and crystal and suffocating expectation, had never felt more like a prison. She climbed the sweeping staircase to her bedroom, locked the door, and finally allowed herself to cry. She was trapped. If she married Marcus, she'd spend the rest of her life as a trophy wife to a man who saw her as a business acquisition. If she refused, she'd lose everything. Her home, her financial security, her gallery. Her father's threats weren't empty. Richard Bennett didn't bluff. Through her tears, Claire pulled out her phone and scrolled aimlessly through social media, looking for some escape from her reality. That's when she saw it, a viral post about alternative solutions to family pressure. Desperate, she clicked through article after article until one headline stopped her cold. Arrangement marriages. How contract partnerships are helping people escape family control. Claire read the entire article twice. It described people entering temporary marriage agreements for various reasons: immigration, inheritance, family pressure. The arrangements were legal, clearly outlined, and when done correctly, mutually beneficial. Most importantly, they offered an escape route. Her mind raced. If she showed up married to someone else, anyone else, her father couldn't force the Thornwood arrangement. She'd buy herself time, freedom, a chance to figure out her own path. It was insane. It was desperate. It was her only option. She spent the next 3 days researching obsessively. Contract marriages, legal requirements, potential risks. The more she learned, the more feasible it seemed. She just needed to find someone trustworthy. Someone with their own reasons for needing a temporary arrangement. On Thursday evening, 2 days before her father's deadline, Claire found herself at Murphy's Pub, a working-class bar near the docks, about as far from her usual social circle as possible. She'd dressed down in jeans and a simple sweater, her long auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail. She needed to think, and she couldn't do that in the cove, glass towers of her family's world. She was nursing her second whiskey when the bartender, a friendly woman named Rosa, struck up a conversation. "Rough day?" Rosa asked, wiping down the bar. "Rough life," Claire admitted, then laughed bitterly. "Sorry, that's dramatic. Honey, I've worked this bar for 15 years. I've heard dramatic. Want to talk about it?" Claire hesitated, then found herself spilling everything. Her father's ultimatum, Marcus Thornwood, the impossible choice. Rosa listened with the patience of someone who'd heard 1,000 stories and judged none of them. "That's a tough spot," Rosa said finally. "You need a way out." "I've been thinking about arrangement marriages," Claire said quietly. "I know it sounds crazy, but if I could find someone willing to do a temporary marriage contract, I could escape this whole mess." Rosa's eyebrows rose. "That's bold. You'd need someone you could trust." "I know, which is why it'll never work. I don't exactly have a roster of trustworthy candidates." Rosa was quiet for a moment, then glanced down the bar. "What about Ethan?" Claire followed her gaze. At the far end of the bar sat a man she'd barely noticed when she walked in. Mid-30s, dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it too many times, wearing a faded flannel shirt and jeans. He was hunched over a notebook, scribbling something with intense focus. "Who's Ethan?" Claire asked. "Regular customer. Good guy. Keeps to himself. Works construction during the day. Writes in here most nights." Rosa leaned in conspiratorially. "He's been dealing with his own family drama lately. Something about his grandmother's will and inheritance disputes. Mentioned needing to be married to access his trust fund." Claire's heart skipped. "Seriously?" "Scout's honor. He's been stressed about it for weeks." Rosa studied Claire carefully. "You want me to introduce you?" This was insane. Claire was seriously considering approaching a complete stranger in a bar to propose a fake marriage. If anyone from her family's social circle could see her now, they'd think she'd lost her mind. Maybe she had. "Yes," Claire said. "Introduce me." Rosa walked down the bar, and Claire watched as she spoke quietly to the man. Ethan looked up, confusion crossing his features. Then his eyes found Claire. Even from a distance, she could see they were a striking gray-blue like storm clouds over the ocean. He stood and walked over, and Claire's first thought was that he moved with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin. No designer clothes, no Rolex watch, no carefully cultivated image, just a regular guy with calloused hands and an uncertain smile. "Rosa says, you wanted to talk to me?" Ethan said, his voice deep and a little rough around the edges. "I have a proposition," Claire said, then winced. That came out wrong. "I mean, can I buy you a drink? This is going to sound absolutely insane, but I promise I'm not crazy." Ethan's lips quirked. "Well, now I'm intrigued." "Sure." They moved to a booth in the corner, and for a moment, Claire just stared at her hands, trying to figure out how to explain this without sounding completely unhinged. "Okay," she began. "I'm going to be very direct because I don't have time for anything else. My father is forcing me into an arranged marriage with a man I despise. If I refuse, He'll cut me off completely and destroy everything I've worked for. I need a way out." Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. "I've been researching arrangement marriages, legal temporary marriage contracts between two people with mutual needs. Rosa mentioned you're dealing with inheritance issues that require you to be married." "She talks too much," Ethan muttered, but there was no real annoyance in his tone. "I know this is crazy," Claire continued, speaking faster now. "We're complete strangers. But I'm desperate, and if you're in a similar situation, maybe we could help each other. A legal marriage contract, clear terms, temporary arrangement. You get access to your inheritance. I escape my father's control. When we're both in better positions, we divorce. Clean, simple, mutually beneficial." She finally looked up at him, and Ethan was staring at her like she'd just proposed they rob a bank together. "You're serious?" he said slowly. "Completely. I know it sounds insane." "It doesn't sound insane," Ethan interrupted. "It sounds desperate, which I understand because I'm pretty desperate myself." Claire's heart leaped. "So you'll consider it?" Ethan leaned back, studying her carefully. "Tell me about yourself. Real stuff, not sales pitch." Claire took a breath. "My name is Claire Bennett. My family owns Bennett Properties. Real estate empire, old money, all the worst stereotypes you can imagine. I run an art gallery that I actually care about, but my father thinks it's a waste of time. He wants me to marry into another real estate family to expand the business. The man he's chosen is twice my age and has a reputation for being controlling. I'd rather live in a cardboard box than marry him." "And cutting you off?" Ethan asked. "Would destroy me financially. The gallery operates on a thin margin. I have savings, but not enough to sustain it long-term without family backing. I need time to establish independence, to prove I can make it work on my own." Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay, my turn. I'm Ethan Cross. I work construction, but I'm also a writer, unpublished, mostly unsuccessful. My grandmother passed away 6 months ago and left me a trust fund worth about $2 million. Sounds great. Except there's a clause. To access it, I have to be married by my 35th birthday, which is in 3 months. Her way of ensuring I settled down." "Why the clause?" Claire asked. She thought I was too much of a loner. Wanted to make sure I didn't end up alone. Ethan smiled sadly. "She meant well, but it's put me in an impossible position. I don't have a girlfriend, no prospects, and I'm not about to marry someone just for money. But you'd marry a stranger for convenience?" Claire challenged gently. "I'd enter a mutually beneficial arrangement with someone who needs help as much as I do," Ethan corrected. "There's a difference." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they were considering hanging between them. "If we did this," Ethan said carefully, "what would the terms be?" Claire pulled out her phone, where she'd drafted a rough outline of what she'd been thinking. "Marriage lasts 1 year minimum to satisfy both our requirements. We live separately, maintain our own lives. Financial matters kept separate, except where legally necessary. Clear exit strategy at the end with an amicable divorce. No romantic expectations or obligations." Ethan read through her notes, his expression thoughtful. "You've really thought this through." "I've had 3 days of panic-driven research," Claire admitted, "and I'm still not sure this isn't the worst idea I've ever had." "It might be," Ethan agreed, "but I don't have a better option. And honestly, you seem sane enough." "High praise," Claire said dryly. Ethan laughed, and the sound was warm, genuine. "Look, I'm not going to lie and say this isn't weird as hell, but you're right. We both need something, and we can provide it for each other." "I'm in. Let's do this." Claire's breath caught. "Seriously? Seriously. But we do this right. Lawyer, proper contract, clear terms. I'm not getting into anything without legal protection for both of us. Agreed. Completely agreed. They shook hands across the table, and Claire felt the calluses on Ethan's palm, the strength in his grip. This was real. She was actually doing this. When do you need to be married by? Ethan asked. My father's deadline is tomorrow. But I figure if I show up already married to someone else, there's nothing he can do about it. Ethan whistled low. That's cutting it close. Can we do it? Legally, I mean? If we go to the courthouse first thing tomorrow and expedite the license, maybe. It'll cost extra. But yeah, it's possible. Claire felt a wild, desperate hope rising in her chest. Okay. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m.? 9 a.m., Ethan agreed. Then, he extended his hand again. Nice to meet you, future wife. Claire laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Nice to meet you, future husband. They exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet at the courthouse. As Claire left the bar and walked back to where her driver waited with the car, she felt like she was floating. She'd just agreed to marry a complete stranger. It was reckless and insane, and possibly the bravest thing she'd ever done. When she climbed into the back seat, her driver, James, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Good evening, Miss Bennett. Where to? Home, James. I need to pack some things. Because tomorrow, she was getting married and escaping the prison of her family's expectations. And if fate had a sense of humor, she'd just met the man who would help her do it. Tomorrow would change everything. The courthouse was a study in bureaucratic efficiency, harsh fluorescent lights, scuffed linoleum floors, and the smell of old paper and industrial cleaner. Claire stood outside at 8:45 in the morning, clutching a folder of documents and trying not to hyperventilate. She'd barely slept. After returning home the night before, she'd packed 2 suitcases with essentials, emptied her personal safe deposit box of jewelry and important documents, and transferred her accessible savings to a new account her father couldn't touch. At 3 in the morning, she'd sat at her desk and written a letter explaining her decision, which she'd leave for her parents after the ceremony. Now, in the mine, cold morning light, the full weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her. She was marrying a stranger, a man she'd known for exactly 12 hours. Second thoughts? Claire spun around. Ethan stood a few feet away, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed. His hair was combed back, and he'd shaved. He looked like he'd made an effort, which somehow made Claire feel a little better. Constant thoughts, Claire admitted. But I'm still here. Me too. Ethan came to stand beside her, looking up at the courthouse. This is surreal. Understatement of the century. They stood in silence for a moment, then Ethan turned to her. Before we go in there, I need to ask, are you absolutely sure about this? Because once we start this process, it's going to be complicated to undo. Claire met his eyes, those storm blue eyes that held surprising kindness. I'm sure, or at least I'm sure that this is better than the alternative. What about you? Same. My grandmother's trust is the only way I can afford to actually pursue writing without working 70-hour weeks. It's my chance at the life I've always wanted. So yeah, I'm in. Okay then. Claire took a deep breath. Let's get married. The process was surprisingly straightforward. They filled out paperwork, paid expedited fees, and provided identification. The clerk who processed their marriage license was a middle-aged woman named Patricia, who looked completely unimpressed by the whole affair. You understand, this is a legally binding contract? Patricia said, peering at them over her glasses. Yes, Claire and Ethan said in unison. And you're both entering this marriage of your own free will? Yes. Fine. You can have the ceremony in courtroom B in 20 minutes. Judge Morrison is handling civil marriages today. Patricia stamped their documents, with the authority of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Next. They sat on a bench outside courtroom B, surrounded by other couples waiting for their turns. Some looked excited, others nervous, a few bored. Claire wondered what her story looked like from the outside. Did they seem like a couple in love rushing to make it official? Or did they radiate the awkward energy of two people who'd met in a bar less than 24 hours ago? "You should probably know something about me," Ethan said suddenly. "Before we go through with this." Claire's stomach clenched. "What? I'm not actually poor." Claire blinked. "What?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, messing up the neat style he'd managed earlier. "The construction work is real. I do it because I like it, keeps me grounded. But my grandmother's trust fund isn't my only money. I inherited some investments from my parents when they passed. Nothing billionaire level, but enough that I don't actually need to work if I don't want to." "Then why do you?" Claire asked, genuinely curious. "Because I don't want to be the kind of person who coasts on inherited wealth. I want to earn something myself, build something that's mine." He met her eyes. "I'm telling you this because you deserve to know who you're marrying, even if it's temporary." Claire processed this information. "Okay, thank you for telling me." She hesitated, then added, "You should probably know something about me too." "What's that?" "I'm terrified. Of my father. Of what happens if he finds out about this before I'm ready. Of what I'm throwing away. But I'm more terrified of living a life that's not mine." She laughed softly. "I don't know if that makes me brave or just reckless. I think it makes you human," Ethan said quietly. A bailiff appeared at the courtroom door. Cross and Bennett? They stood together, and Claire felt Ethan's hand brush against hers. Without thinking, she grabbed it, and he squeezed back. "Ready?" he asked, "as I'll ever be." Judge Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who conducted the ceremony with efficient professionalism. The words were standard, simple, legally binding. "Do you take this person?" "I do. I do. By the power vested in me. You may kiss if you wish." Claire and Ethan looked at each other awkwardly. Then Ethan leaned in and pressed a brief chaste kiss to her cheek. "Congratulations," Judge Morrison said, signing their marriage certificate. "You're now legally married." And just like that, Claire Bennett became Claire Cross. They emerged from the courthouse into morning sunshine, both holding copies of their marriage certificate like they weren't quite sure what to do with them. "So," Ethan said, "what now?" "Now I go home and face my family," Claire said, her stomach twisting. "Want to come with me? You're my husband now. Might as well meet the in-laws." Ethan's expression was a mix of amusement and apprehension. "That's going to be interesting." That's one word for it. They took separate cars, Claire's driven by James, Ethan following behind in a beat-up pickup truck that made James visibly wince when he saw it. As they drove toward the Bennett estate, Claire practiced what she would say. "Hi, Dad. Surprise. I got married. Dad, meet my husband. We met yesterday." There was no version of this conversation that didn't end in an explosion. The Bennett mansion loomed ahead, all neoclassical columns and perfectly manicured lawns. Claire saw Ethan's eyes widen as they pulled through the gates. "You weren't kidding about old money," he muttered as he parked his truck next to the fleet of luxury cars in the circular drive. "Brace yourself," Claire said. "This is going to be ugly." They found her parents in the morning room, finishing breakfast. Victoria was reading the Times while Richard reviewed contracts, his routine unchanged by the drama of the previous days. They both looked up as Claire entered, Ethan a step behind her. "Claire," Victoria said, her smile automatic. "You're up early. And you've brought a friend?" "Not a friend," Claire said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Mom, Dad, this is Ethan Cross." "My husband." The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Richard set down his coffee cup very slowly, his expression transforming from confusion to fury. "I beg your pardon?" Claire held up the marriage certificate. "We were married this morning at the courthouse. So the arrangement with Marcus Thornwood is off. I'm already married." Victoria made a strangled sound. Richard's face went an alarming shade of red. "You did what?" he roared, standing so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "I got married," Claire repeated, forcing herself to meet her father's eyes. "To someone I chose. Not a business merger, not a family arrangement. My choice." Richard's gaze swung to Ethan, who stood quietly beside Claire, his expression neutral but his jaw tight. "And who the hell are you?" "Ethan Cross," Ethan said evenly. "Construction worker, writer, and as of this morning, your son-in-law." "Construction worker," Richard repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "My daughter married a common laborer." "Dad," Claire started, but Richard cut her off. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The Thornwood deal was worth $500 million. Marcus was willing to bring his company into partnership with ours, and you threw it away for some nobody you probably met last week." "Yesterday, actually," Claire said, her temper rising to match his. "And I'd rather be married to a nobody who respects me than a man who sees me as a business acquisition." "Respect?" Richard laughed harshly. "You want to talk about respect? You disrespected this entire family with this stunt. I warned you what would happen if you defied me." "I know. You'll cut me off. Do it. I'm prepared." Victoria finally found her voice. "Claire, darling, think about what you're saying. You're throwing away your entire future." "No, Mother. I'm claiming my future. There's a difference." Claire reached for Ethan's hand, drawing strength from the solid presence beside her. "I'm 26 years old. I have a right to choose who I marry, how I live my life. You don't get to decide that for me anymore." Richard's expression hardened into something cold and calculated. "Fine. You want independence? You have it. You're out of this house today. Your trust fund is frozen. Your access to Bennett family resources is revoked. And your precious art gallery? I'm calling the bank this afternoon. Without my backing, you'll default on your lease within the month." Each word was designed to wound, and they hit their mark. Claire felt her knees weaken, but Ethan's hand tightened around hers, anchoring her. "I understand," Claire said quietly. "I'll have my things moved out by tonight." "You're serious about this," Victoria said, her voice strange. "You're actually willing to walk away from everything." "From everything you think matters," Claire corrected. "Yes." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm calling our lawyers. I want you removed from all family accounts immediately. Do what you need to do," Claire said. Then, she turned to Ethan. "Can we go?" "Yeah," Ethan said softly. "We can go." They walked out of that morning room together through the marble foyer where Claire had played as a child, past the sweeping staircase she'd descended in designer gowns for countless parties. James met them at the door, his usual stoic expression cracked by concern. "Miss Claire, Mrs. Cross." He corrected himself. "Your bags?" "In my room." "Can you help us load them?" "Of course." Within an hour, Claire's entire life was packed into 2 suitcases and 3 boxes. James loaded them into Ethan's truck while Claire took one last walk through the house. She'd lived here her whole life, but it had never really felt like home. Just a beautiful prison, where she played the role of perfect daughter. She wasn't that person anymore. Downstairs, Ethan waited by his truck, giving her space for goodbye. Claire didn't go back inside. She just climbed into the passenger seat of Ethan's pickup, the leather interior worn but clean, smelling faintly of sawdust and coffee. "Where to?" Ethan asked. "I have no idea," Claire admitted, then laughed. "I just walked away from everything I've ever known to marry a stranger, and I don't have a plan beyond this moment." "Well," Ethan said, starting the engine. "I have a 2-bedroom apartment in Riverside. Nothing fancy, but it's clean, and the rent's paid through the end of the year. You can take the 2nd bedroom until you figure things out." Claire looked at him, this man who owed her nothing, but was offering her everything he could. "Thank you." "Thank you," Ethan replied. "You just helped me access $2 million. Letting you crash in my spare room is the least I can do." They drove away from the Bennett estate, and Claire didn't look back. She'd just burned down her old life. Now she had to figure out how to build a new one, with a husband she'd known for exactly 1 day. Ethan's apartment was exactly what Claire expected from a construction worker/writer: functional, lived in, and refreshingly normal. The building was a mid-rise in Riverside, the kind of place where neighbors actually knew each other's names. The apartment itself was small, but well-maintained, with large windows that let in plenty of light, second-hand furniture that matched nothing, and bookshelves crammed with paperbacks. "Sorry about the mess," Ethan said, quickly gathering scattered papers from the couch. "I wasn't exactly expecting a roommate." "It's perfect," Claire said, and she meant it. After the sterile perfection of the Bennett mansion, this place felt real. The spare bedroom was tiny, just enough space for a full-size bed, a small dresser, and a chair, but it had its own window looking out over the neighborhood. Claire set her suitcases down and sat on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. A knock at the door. Ethan stood in the doorway, holding 2 bottles of beer. "Figured you might need this." Claire accepted one gratefully. "Thanks." Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "So, we should probably talk about logistics." "Logistics. Right." Claire took a long drink. "I have about $50,000 in personal savings that my father can't touch. That'll keep me afloat for a while, but I need to figure out how to save the gallery. Without my father's backing, the bank will call my loan." "How much do you owe?" $120,000. It's manageable with steady income, but I'm still building the client base. Most galleries operate at a loss for the first 5 years. Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I could cover it." Claire's head snapped up. "What?" "My grandmother's trust. Once I access it, I could pay off your gallery loan. Consider it a wedding gift." "Ethan, no, I can't accept that." "Why not? You married me so I could get that money. It's only fair I help you out." "Because this is a business arrangement," Claire said firmly. "We agreed. Financial matters stay separate except where legally necessary. Claire, you just gave up everything to escape your father. Let me help, and if I accept money from you, I'm just trading one form of dependence for another." Claire met his eyes. "I need to do this myself. I need to prove I can survive without Bennett money." Ethan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I respect that. But the offer stands if you change your mind." "Thank you." Really, they sat in companionable silence, drinking their beers and processing the surreal reality of their situation. "This is so weird," Claire said finally. "Extremely weird," Ethan agreed. "I woke up yesterday single and now I'm married to a woman whose favorite color I don't even know." "Blue," Claire said. "Ocean blue specifically. What's yours?" "Gray." "Storm cloud gray. Fitting, considering your eyes." Ethan smiled. "See? We're getting to know each other already." Over the next week, they settled into an awkward routine. Ethan left for construction sites early in the morning, while Claire spent her days at the gallery, desperately trying to secure new clients and cut expenses. They'd pass each other in the apartment like polite strangers sharing space. Morning. "How was your day?" "Fine, you?" "Good," both carefully maintaining the boundaries they'd agreed upon. But small details emerged. Ethan was religious about his morning coffee and impossibly messy when he cooked. Claire discovered he wrote late into the night, the soft tap of keyboard keys audible through the wall. She learned he took his construction work seriously, coming home with sawdust in his hair and stories about the crew he worked with, guys named Danny and Marcus who treated him like family. Claire, in turn, shared pieces of her world, the gallery opening she was planning for an emerging sculptor, her frustration with elitist art critics, the small victories when a piece sold. One evening, 2 weeks into their arrangement, Ethan came home to find Claire sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by financial statements, her head in her hands. "That bad?" he asked gently. "The bank called. They're moving up my loan payment deadline. I have 6 weeks to come up with $60,000 or they'll foreclose." Claire looked up, and Ethan saw the exhaustion in her eyes. "I don't have it. Even if I liquidate everything, I'm short." Ethan pulled out the chair across from her. "Have you heard from your father?" Radio silence. "He's frozen me out completely." Claire laughed bitterly. "I knew he would, but some stupid part of me hoped that he'd choose you over his pride." "Yeah. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Walking away. Even if I lose everything?" "You didn't lose everything. You gained freedom. That's worth more than money." Claire smiled weakly. Easy to say when you're about to inherit $2 million. "Speaking of which," Ethan said, "I got confirmation today. The trust fund transfers next week. And my offer still stands. I can't accept your money, Ethan. Then let me invest in your gallery. Business investment, not a handout. I give you the capital you need, and in return, I get a percentage of future profits." Claire frowned. "Why would you want to invest in an art gallery?" "Because I believe in supporting people's dreams, and because your gallery matters to you, which means it's worth investing in." Ethan leaned forward. "Look, we entered this arrangement to help each other. Let me actually help." Claire wanted to refuse on principle, but she was drowning, and Ethan was offering a life raft. 30% equity, she said finally. "You invest $60,000, you get 30% ownership of Bennett Arts." 20%, Ethan countered. "I'm not trying to take control of your business." 25. Final offer. Ethan grinned. "Deal. You drive a hard bargain, wife. And don't you forget it, husband." They shook on it, and Claire felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't compromising her independence, she was accepting partnership. There was a difference. That night, Ethan ordered Chinese takeout, and they ate together at the kitchen table, actually talking beyond their usual polite exchanges. Claire learned that Ethan had been writing since he was 15, that his parents had died in a car accident when he was 20, that his grandmother had raised him afterward and instilled in him the value of hard work. "She sounds amazing," Claire said. She was. Stubborn as hell, but she loved fiercely. "When she got sick, I moved back here to take care of her." Ethan's expression grew distant. The trust fund clause was her way of making sure I didn't isolate myself after she was gone. She worried I'd bury myself in work and forget to actually live. Was she right? Probably. Before you crashed into my life, my entire existence was construction sites, writing rejections, and Murphy's Pub on Thursday nights. And now? Now I'm married to a woman who intimidates me, inspires me, and makes me want to be less of a hermit. Ethan smiled. So yeah, Graham would approve, even if the circumstances are bizarre. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest, not attraction exactly, but connection, genuine fondness for this unexpected person who'd become her partner in chaos. "My turn for a confession," Claire said. "I don't actually know if I'm any good at running a gallery. My father always said I was wasting my time, that I didn't have business sense. What if he was right?" He wasn't. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because you walked away from guaranteed wealth to pursue something you believed in. That takes guts and vision. Those are exactly the traits of a successful entrepreneur. Ethan met her eyes. Your father was wrong about you, Claire. And you're going to prove it. No one had ever expressed that kind of faith in her. Not her family, not her friends from the Bennett social circle. No one. The fact that it came from a man she'd known less than 3 weeks was absurd and oddly perfect. "Thank you," she whispered. "Any time." As September turned to October, their lives continued to intertwine. The trust fund came through, and Ethan invested in Bennett Arts as promised. Claire threw herself into planning her biggest gallery showing yet, determined to make it a success. Ethan started sending his manuscript to agents, finally taking his writing seriously. They fell into rhythms, morning coffee together before they went their separate ways. Evening check-ins where they'd share their days. Weekend breakfasts at a diner down the street where the waitress started calling them the newlyweds with a knowing smile. People assumed they were a real couple, and neither bothered to correct them. It was easier to play along than explain their unconventional arrangement. But sometimes, late at night when Claire couldn't sleep, she'd hear Ethan typing in his room and feel a strange sense of comfort knowing he was there. This wasn't what she'd imagined when she'd proposed this arrangement. She'd expected cold practicality, separate lives that occasionally intersected. Instead, she'd found friendship, partnership, something that felt suspiciously like home. It should have been perfect, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were both pretending, not to the world, but to themselves. That the boundaries they'd so carefully constructed were starting to blur, and neither of them knew how to acknowledge it. The first crack in their carefully maintained boundaries appeared on a Thursday in late October. Claire's gallery showing was the next evening, and she'd been running on coffee and adrenaline for 72 straight hours. Ethan found her at 2 a.m, still awake, frantically arranging and rearranging the gallery space. "You're going to collapse," he said from the doorway. Claire jumped, nearly dropping the sculpture she was repositioning. "What are you doing here? You texted me at midnight asking if cobalt blue or navy looked better. I figured you'd spiraled." Ethan held up a paper bag. "I brought reinforcements, coffee and those weird fancy donuts you like." Claire's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "You brought me donuts?" Yes. Are you okay?" "I'm terrified," Claire admitted, sinking onto a bench. "What if nobody comes tomorrow? What if they come and hate everything? What if my father was right and I'm completely delusional about my abilities?" Ethan sat beside her, setting the bag between them. "First, drink this." He handed her coffee. "Second, take a breath. Third, listen to me." Claire obeyed, sipping the coffee and waiting. "You've worked your ass off for 3 months to make this happen. You've secured loans, networked with collectors, supported artists nobody else believed in. That's not delusion. That's vision and determination." Ethan turned to face her fully. "Your father was wrong, Claire. About you. About what matters. About everything. You're building something real here. How can you be so sure? Because I see you. The real you, not the version your family wanted you to be. And that person is capable of incredible things." Claire stared at him, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. In the dim gallery lighting, Ethan's features were soft, his storm blue eyes earnest. Without thinking, she leaned forward and kissed him. It was supposed to be brief, a thank you, a moment of gratitude. But Ethan kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, and suddenly brief became deep and searching, and absolutely not part of their arrangement. Claire pulled back abruptly, her eyes wide. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have," we agreed. "It's okay," Ethan said quickly, though his breathing was unsteady. "We're both exhausted and stressed. It didn't mean anything." "Right. It didn't mean anything." They sat in awkward silence, not looking at each other, both pretending their hearts weren't racing. "I should go home," Ethan said finally. "Yeah, I'll finish up here." "Claire." "It's fine, Ethan. Really. Just forget it happened." He left, and Claire sat alone in the gallery surrounded by beautiful art. Her lips still tingling from a kiss she was supposed to pretend didn't matter. The gallery showing the next evening was a resounding success. Over 200 people attended, including several major collectors and critics. By the end of the night, Claire had sold 6 pieces and secured commitments for 3 more exhibitions. The art world was taking notice of Bennett Arts. Ethan stayed by her side the entire evening, playing the role of supportive husband so convincingly that no one questioned it. He charmed collectors, asked intelligent questions about the artwork, and made Claire laugh when the stress threatened to overwhelm her. To everyone watching, they were a perfect couple. But they hadn't talked about the kiss, hadn't acknowledged that something had shifted. After the last guest left and they'd cleaned up, Claire found Ethan on the gallery's back patio, looking up at the city lights. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly. "For being here. Of course. You're my wife." He said it lightly, but something in his tone made Claire's breath catch. "Ethan, about last night. We don't have to talk about it." "But what if I want to?" Claire stepped closer. What if it did mean something? Ethan turned to face her, his expression guarded. "Claire, we have an arrangement. Clear boundaries. If we start blurring those lines, it gets complicated. Maybe I want complicated. You don't. You wanted an escape from your family, time to build your independence. That's what this is." "That's what it was," Claire corrected. "But it's been 4 months, Ethan. We're not strangers anymore. We're friends. And maybe we could be more?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "And when the year is up and we get divorced like we planned, what happens then?" Claire hadn't thought that far ahead. The divorce had always been abstract, a distant endpoint. But now, standing here with Ethan looking at her like he wanted to pull her close and push her away simultaneously, the thought of walking away felt impossible. "I don't know," she admitted. "Exactly. You don't know. And neither do I." Ethan ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I can't do this halfway, Claire. I can't let myself fall for you when there's an expiration date on us. Who says there has to be?" "We did. In our contract, in our agreement, in every conversation we've had about this being temporary." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "And if I've changed my mind?" "Have you? Or are you just high on tonight's success and grateful I showed up?" The question hit like a slap. Claire stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "That's not fair. None of this is fair," Ethan said quietly. "We entered into this thing with clear rules because we both needed something. Now you're talking about changing everything, and I don't know if that's what you really want, or if you're scared of being alone again." "I'm not scared of being alone. I'm scared of losing you." The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Ethan's expression cracked, vulnerability flooding his features. "Claire, I know we started this as an arrangement, but somewhere along the way, you became the best part of my day. Coming home to you, sharing coffee in the morning, hearing about your writing, it all matters to me. You matter to me. You matter to me too," Ethan said, his voice rough. "That's the problem. Because in 8 months we're supposed to walk away from each other, and I don't know if I can do that." "Then don't. Let's renegotiate." "To what? We stay married for real? Why not?" "Because marriage isn't just a piece of paper and shared rent, Claire. It's commitment, vulnerability, building a life together. Are you ready for that? Because I don't think you know what you want yet." Claire wanted to argue, but doubt crept in. Was Ethan right? Was she confusing gratitude and proximity for actual feelings? Or was she finally allowing herself to acknowledge what had been growing between them for months? "I need time," she said finally, "to figure out what I'm feeling." "We both do," Ethan agreed. "So let's table this. Go back to our arrangement. Maintain boundaries. If in a few months we both still feel this way, we'll talk about it then." It was the rational choice, the safe choice. It felt like cowardice, but Claire nodded. "Okay, we table it." They went home that night in separate cars, maintaining the physical distance that mirrored the emotional wall they'd just erected between them. And for the next several weeks, they were scrupulously polite, roommates who happened to be married, nothing more. Except late at night, Claire would lie awake and think about that kiss, about the way Ethan looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, about the future they were both too afraid to reach for. And in his room, Ethan did the same, his fingers hovering over his keyboard, unable to write anything except her name. December arrived with unexpected snowfall that blanketed the city in white. Claire's gallery was thriving, 2 more successful showings, and a waiting list of artists wanting to be featured. Ethan had signed with a literary agent who loved his manuscript and was shopping it to publishers. On paper, their arrangement was working perfectly. In reality, they were both miserable. The careful distance they'd maintained since the kiss had created a chasm neither knew how to cross. They were polite, professional, excruciatingly careful not to touch or linger too long in each other's presence. The easy friendship they'd built had been replaced by stilted conversations and avoided eye contact. "This is ridiculous," Claire's best friend Natasha said over lunch. Claire had finally confided in her about the arrangement marriage and the subsequent complications. "You're in love with him. I'm not. We're not. It's complicated," Claire stammered. "It's only complicated because you're both being idiots." Natasha pointed her fork at Claire for emphasis. "You married this man. You live with him. You care about him. At what point does the arrangement become a real relationship? When we both stop being terrified of getting hurt," Claire admitted quietly. "So talk to him. Life's too short to waste on fear." But that evening, when Claire came home ready to finally have that conversation, she found the apartment empty, except for a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to Murphy's. Need to think." Claire stared at the note, her stomach sinking. Murphy's pub was where they'd met, where this entire strange journey had started. Was Ethan regretting everything, planning his escape from their arrangement? She grabbed her coat and headed out into the snowy night. Murphy's was warm and crowded when Claire pushed through the door. She spotted Ethan immediately, sitting at the same bar stool where she'd first seen him, nursing a whiskey and talking to Rosa. Rosa saw Claire first and smiled knowingly. "Well, well. Look who's here." Ethan turned, surprise flickering across his face. "Claire? What are you? We need to talk," Claire said firmly. "Now." They moved to the same corner booth where they'd hammered out their arrangement 7 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "I can't do this anymore," Claire said without preamble. Ethan's face went pale. "You want out of the arrangement?" "No. I can't keep pretending I don't have feelings for you." Ethan stared at her. "Claire, I know we agreed to maintain boundaries. I know we said this was temporary, but somewhere between burning bridges with my family and building a life I actually want, I fell for you." Claire's hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "I fell for the way you make terrible coffee and leave books everywhere. I fell for your terrible jokes and your determination to help people even when it's inconvenient. I fell for you, Ethan Cross, and I don't know how to stop." Ethan was silent for so long Claire thought she might actually die from the suspense. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "You think you're the only one?" he said. "Claire, I've been in love with you since that night you showed up at Murphy's looking terrified and determined and absolutely insane. I tried to keep my distance. I tried to stick to the arrangement. But I wake up every morning wanting to kiss you, and I go to bed every night wishing you were beside me, and I can't write anything that isn't about you. Claire's breath caught. You love me? Completely. Hopelessly. Which is why I've been such a coward about this whole thing. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hands. I was terrified that if I admitted how I felt, you'd realize you'd only needed me as an escape plan. That once you were stable and successful, you wouldn't actually want me. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Claire said, tears streaming down her face. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Even though I'm a construction worker who writes unpublished novels, especially because you're a construction worker who writes. Because you're real, Ethan. You see me. Not my family's money or my last name or what I can do for you. Just me. Ethan stood, pulling Claire up with him. So what do we do? Renegotiate the contract? Screw the contract, Claire said. I want a real marriage. With you. If you'll have me. If I'll have you? Ethan laughed again, cupping her face in his hands. Claire, I married you 7 months ago in a courthouse wearing my least wrinkled shirt. You really think I'm going to say no now? He kissed her then, deep and certain and nothing like that first careful kiss in the gallery. This was a promise, a choice, a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Rosa was watching from the bar with a satisfied smile. She raised her glass in a toast, and Claire laughed, burying her face in Ethan's shoulder. We're really doing this, she murmured against his shirt. Real marriage, real life, all of it. All of it, Ethan confirmed, including the part where I officially invest more in your gallery and you read my terrible first drafts, and the part where we tell people we met at a bar and got married the next day. That's the best part of the story. They went home that night holding hands, the snow falling softly around them. The apartment that had been a temporary arrangement now felt like what it actually was. Home. That weekend, they had a small celebration dinner with the few people who mattered. Natasha, who claimed credit for Claire's romantic epiphany. Rosa from Murphy's, who'd introduced them in the first place. The construction crew Ethan worked with, who roasted him mercilessly about his whirlwind romance. Claire's friend from college, who'd stuck by her after the family split. No Bennett family members. Claire had sent her parents an email telling them she was happy, successful, and still married. They hadn't responded. The silence hurt, but less than Claire expected. She'd built a new family, one based on choice rather than obligation. A week before Christmas, Ethan surprised Claire with a small box at breakfast. We did this whole marriage thing backward, he said as she opened it. Courthouse first, feelings later. So I figured we should do at least one thing in the right order. Inside was a simple silver ring with a small sapphire, ocean blue, her favorite color. It's not a fake wedding ring, Ethan said. It's an actual proposal. Claire Bennett Cross. Will you stay married to me? For real this time, no expiration date, no contracts, just us figuring it out together. Claire slipped the ring onto her finger beside the plain band they'd bought at the courthouse. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They spent Christmas in their small apartment, just the two of them, and it was the best holiday Claire had ever experienced. No forced family dinners, no obligation gifts, no performance. Just them, Chinese takeout, and a movie marathon. As the year came to a close, Claire reflected on everything that had changed. A year ago, she'd been trapped in her father's mansion, facing a forced marriage to a man she despised. Now she was running a successful gallery, married to someone she actually loved, and building a life entirely her own. What are you thinking? Ethan asked, pulling her closer on the couch. That I made the right choice. Walking away, marrying a stranger. All of it. How do you know? Because I'm happy. Really. Genuinely happy. Are you? Ethan kissed her temple. More than I ever thought possible. Outside, the city glittered with New Year's Eve celebrations. Inside, two people who'd started as desperate strangers had become something infinitely more precious. Partners, lovers, home. And when midnight struck, they kissed like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms and new beginnings. Claire's gallery had expanded to a second location, and Ethan's novel had been accepted by a major publisher with a release date set for fall. Their 1-year marriage anniversary was approaching, and neither could believe how much had changed. But their carefully built happiness faced an unexpected test when Claire received a letter in the mail bearing the Bennett Properties logo. "What is it?" Ethan asked, noticing her pale face. Claire opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was an invitation to her father's 65th birthday gala, a massive event that would include hundreds of business associates, family members, and society elite. "He's inviting me," Claire whispered, scanning the formal card. "After a year of silence, he's inviting me to his birthday party." Ethan read over her shoulder. "There's a personal note." Claire pulled out the second card, written in her father's distinctive handwriting. "Claire, I've had time to reflect on our last conversation. I would like to see you. There are things we should discuss. Please come." "Father, it could be a trap," Ethan said carefully. "Some kind of power play." "Or it could be an olive branch," Claire replied, though doubt colored her voice. "He's never admitted regret before. What if he's actually changed?" "People like your father don't change, Claire. They just change tactics. Maybe. But he's still my father. And despite everything, some part of me wants him to apologize? To admit he was wrong? Wants him to see what I've built and acknowledge I was right." Claire met Ethan's eyes. "Is that pathetic?" "It's human," Ethan said, pulling her close. "What do you want to do?" Claire considered. The smart thing would be to ignore the invitation, to maintain the clean break she'd made. But the hopeful part of her, the daughter who still remembered being 5 years old and thinking her father was a hero, wanted to believe reconciliation was possible. "I want to go," she said finally. "But only if you come with me." "Are you sure? Your father wasn't exactly welcoming last time, which is why I need you there. My partner, my backup, my reminder of what actually matters." Ethan kissed her forehead. "Then, we'll go. Together." The gala was held at the Bennett estate, and as their car pulled through the familiar gates, Claire felt her stomach churn. Ethan squeezed her hand. "We can leave any time you want," he reminded her. "You're in control here." The mansion was ablaze with lights, dozens of luxury cars lining the circular drive. Claire wore a simple but elegant navy dress she'd bought with her own money, no borrowed Bennett finery. Ethan looked devastating in a dark suit that made his eyes seem even more gray-blue. They walked in together, and Claire felt every eye in the room turn toward them. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that Claire Bennett? I heard she ran off with some nobody. Married him in a courthouse, can you imagine?" Her father cut her off completely. Claire held her head high, Ethan's steady presence beside her anchoring her resolve. Victoria spotted them first. She crossed the room, her expression a mixture of emotions Claire couldn't quite read. "Claire," her mother said quietly, "you came. I was invited." Victoria's eyes moved to Ethan, and something flickered across her face. Assessment, curiosity, maybe even respect. "Mr. Cross, it's good to see you again." "Mrs. Bennett," Ethan replied politely, "your father is in his study. He asked that you meet him there when you arrived." Victoria hesitated, then touched Claire's arm briefly. "You look well, darling. successful. It wasn't an apology, but it was more than Claire had expected. They found Richard Bennett in his study, the same room where he'd delivered his ultimatum over a year ago. He looked older than Claire remembered, more gray in his hair, new lines around his eyes. "Claire," he said, standing as they entered. "Thank you for coming. Father." Richard's gaze moved to Ethan, and for a long moment, the two men sized each other up. "Mr. Cross," Richard said finally, "I owe you an apology." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Sir? When you married my daughter, I assumed you were after her money. I said some unforgivable things." Richard's jaw tightened like the words were physically painful. "I've since learned that you invested your own inheritance in Claire's gallery, that you've supported her business without seeking control or credit, that you're the reason she's thriving rather than failing like I predicted." Claire's breath caught. "You've been keeping tabs on me?" "Of course I have. You're my daughter." Richard moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. "Your gallery has been profitable for 6 consecutive months. You've expanded to a second location. You're being featured in Art Monthly next issue." He looked at Claire directly for the first time. "You've proven me wrong, about your business sense, about your capabilities, about everything. Is this why you invited me here?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "To admit you were wrong?" "I invited you here because I miss my daughter," Richard said quietly, "and because I've realized that my definition of success was too narrow. You're successful, Claire, just not in the way I understood." Tears burned Claire's eyes. "You cut me off. You tried to destroy my gallery. I know. I was angry and stubborn and convinced I knew what was best for you." Richard's expression cracked slightly. "I've spent the past year watching you build a life without me, and I've come to understand that you didn't need my money or my connections. You needed my belief, and I failed to give it to you." "Why now?" Claire asked. "Why reach out after all this time?" "Because I'm 65 years old, and I'm looking at what I've actually built. A business empire, yes, but an empty house. Your mother barely speaks to me except at functions. You're gone. I have money and power and nothing that actually matters." Richard's voice grew hoarse. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hoped we might find a way forward." Claire looked at Ethan, who gave her a slight nod. "Your choice." "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," Claire said slowly. "What you did hurt me deeply, but I'm willing to try to rebuild something. Slowly. If you can accept that my life looks different than what you planned." "I can accept that," Richard said. "I want to accept that." It wasn't a complete reconciliation. The wounds were too deep for instant healing. But it was a beginning. They returned to the party, and Richard made a point of introducing Claire and Ethan to his business associates, not as his disappointing daughter and her regrettable choice, but as successful entrepreneurs in their own right. Claire watched her father describe Bennett Arts with something that might have been pride, and felt something complicated loosen in her chest. Later, as they danced together in the ballroom where Claire had attended hundreds of events as a child, Ethan pulled her close. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so. It's strange. I spent so long being angry at him, and now you're allowing yourself to hope he might actually change? Is that naive?" "It's optimistic. There's a difference." Ethan spun her gently. "But remember, you don't need his approval anymore. You've already proven everything that matters." "I know. But it still feels good to have him see it. You're human. That's allowed." As the evening wound down, Victoria pulled Claire aside. "I wanted to apologize as well," she said quietly. "I should have stood up for you that day in the conference room. I should have defended your right to choose your own path." "Why didn't you?" Claire asked, not accusatorily. "Just curious. Because I've spent 40 years playing the role of perfect society wife. I forgot how to be anything else." Victoria's expression was genuinely sad, but watching you walk away and build a life on your own terms, it reminded me what courage looks like. I'm proud of you, Claire. Claire hugged her mother, surprising them both. It wasn't perfect. Years of emotional distance couldn't be erased in one evening, but it was something. Driving home that night, Claire felt lighter than she had in months. Thank you for coming with me, she told Ethan. Always. That's what partners do. Do you think my father really meant it? About changing? I think he meant it in the moment. Whether he follows through is another question. But Claire, it doesn't matter. You've already built a life you love, with or without his approval. I know, but having both feels better. I get that. Back in their apartment, Claire changed into comfortable clothes and found Ethan on the balcony, looking out over the city. What are you thinking about? She asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. About how far we've come. A year ago, we were strangers in a bar making a desperate deal. Now look at us. Happily married, financially stable, professionally successful. Claire rested her chin on his shoulder. We did pretty well for ourselves. Better than well. We built something real. Ethan turned in her arms. I know we started as an arrangement, but Claire, you're the best decision I've ever made. Even though I'm high maintenance and stubborn? Especially because you're high maintenance and stubborn. They stood together on that balcony, the city lights glittering below, and Claire felt profoundly grateful for the moment of desperation that had brought them together. Sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places. 2 years later, Claire stood in the new flagship location of Bennett Arts, a 3-story gallery space in the heart of the city's art district. The grand opening had been a triumph. Critics, collectors, and artists mingling in the bright, airy space she'd designed herself. But her favorite moment had been watching Ethan's reaction when he'd first seen his novel displayed in the gallery's bookshop corner, right beside art books and exhibition catalogs. "You're selling my book in your gallery," he'd said, touching the cover with reverent fingers. "It's a story about an artist finding his voice while falling in love with a woman who teaches him what matters," Claire had replied. "It belongs here." Now, as the opening wound down, Claire found Ethan talking with Richard Bennett, a sight that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Their relationship had slowly, carefully rebuilt into something new. Richard had even invested in the new gallery space as a silent partner who trusted Claire's vision completely. Victoria approached, smiling. "Darling, this is spectacular. You should be very proud." "I am," Claire said honestly. "It's everything I dreamed of. And more, I suspect." Victoria's gaze moved to Ethan. "He's good for you. I'm glad you didn't listen to your father and me back then. Me too, Mom. They'd never be the perfect family. Too much damage had been done for that. But they'd found a way forward. Awkward holiday dinners, occasional gallery visits, phone calls that were sometimes stilted, but always genuine. It was enough." That night, back in the house they'd bought together 6 months ago, a cozy place with a garden and space for Ethan's writing office and Claire's studio, they collapsed on the couch in exhausted contentment. "Success is exhausting," Claire declared. "But worth it," Ethan replied, pulling her close. "Definitely worth it." Claire tilted her head to look at him. "Thank you. For everything. For taking a chance on a desperate woman in a bar with an insane proposal. Best insane proposal I've ever accepted," Ethan said, kissing her temple. "Though I have a proposal of my own." Claire sat up slightly. "What kind of proposal?" Ethan's expression grew soft, vulnerable in that way that still made Claire's heart flip. "I know we're already married. We've been married for over 2 years. But we did it backward. Legality first. Feelings later. So I was thinking." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Claire's breath caught. "We should do it right this time. Actually plan a wedding, invite the people who matter, celebrate not just the legal contract but what we've built together. He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring with interwoven silver and gold bands. Claire Bennett Cross, will you marry me again? With all our friends watching, with vows we actually write, with the full celebration we skipped the first time? Tears streamed down Claire's face. You want to have a real wedding? I want to stand in front of everyone we love and promise you forever. Not because we need the legal protection, but because I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours. Yes, Claire laughed through her tears. Yes, you ridiculous romantic. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed with the certainty of two people who'd started as strangers and become each other's home. 3 months later, they stood in a small garden venue surrounded by 50 of their favorite people. Rosa from Murphy's Pub served as Claire's maid of honor. Ethan's construction crew formed his groomsmen. Richard and Victoria sat in the front row beside Natasha and Ethan's literary agent, and all the people who'd supported their unconventional journey. Claire wore a simple white dress she'd chosen herself. Ethan wore a suit that actually fit properly. And when they exchanged vows they'd written, promises about partnership and respect and choosing each other every single day, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. I promise to never refuse your tips, Claire said, referencing their inside joke, and Ethan laughed. I promise to always order too much takeout, he replied, and to see you exactly as you are. Brilliant, stubborn, and absolutely perfect. When the officiant pronounced them married, they kissed to thunderous applause, and Claire felt the circle complete. They'd started this journey as two desperate people making a practical arrangement. They'd become friends, then lovers, then genuine partners. At the reception, Richard gave a speech that surprised everyone. 2 years ago, my daughter made a choice that terrified me. She walked away from everything I thought mattered to marry a man I didn't approve of. I said terrible things. I tried to control her future. His voice grew thick with emotion. I was wrong. Claire, you taught me that real success isn't measured in profit margins or property portfolios. It's measured in courage, integrity, and the willingness to risk everything for what you believe in. You have more of those qualities than anyone I know. I'm proud to be your father. Claire cried. Victoria cried. Even Ethan had to wipe his eyes. Later, dancing together under strings of lights as stars appeared overhead, Claire rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. We did it, she murmured. We actually made this work. Did you ever doubt we would? Every single day for the first 6 months, Claire admitted, laughing. Then less. Then, not at all. When did you know, Ethan asked, that this was real? That night in Murphy's when you told me you loved me. What about you? The morning after our courthouse wedding, when you made terrible coffee and burned toast, and I realized I didn't want you to ever leave my kitchen. Your kitchen was a disaster, by the way. Our kitchen is much better. Because I organized it. I love you, Ethan said simply. I love you too. My husband. My partner. My best terrible decision. Best terrible decision, he agreed, spinning her under the lights. And as they danced, surrounded by love and acceptance in the life they'd built together, Claire reflected on the strange, beautiful path that had brought them here. She'd walked into a bar desperate and alone, proposing a fake marriage to a stranger. She was leaving with a real partner, genuine love, and the certainty that sometimes the best things in life came from the riskiest leaps of faith. She'd married a stranger to escape her family. That stranger had become her home. And that was the best plot twist of all. The end. If you enjoyed this story, rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments below. And don't forget to check out more heartwarming tales. Thanks for watching.